Warning! Rick Thunder's information, opinions, and stated facts, especially his facts, may be incorrect due to a series of keyboards in the hot tub related electrocution accidents. These occurred in the early, mid, and late 80s. Thank you!
Oh my God, Brian, I heard you have Rick Thunder coming over. Get me tickets right now.
Hi, Brian. I heard Rick Thunder is going to be at your house. I want tickets.
Hey, booktube dudes and dudettes. It's me, Rick Thunder, and I'm back from the 1980s. The synth pop king himself, me, Rick Thunder, and I'm back. We're going to talk about some books today that came out in the 1980s. And why? Because it's cool, and that's why it's awesome.
Max Syndrome.
It's cool. Let's talk some books with me, Rick Thunder. You know, I was there. I was there through the 80s. I'm still kind of there if you think about it. And that's a fact. You know, when I'm playing on the synth pop keyboards, nothing can get me down. So that's why in 1980, when Gene Hungry Like the Wolf came out with his Book of the New Sun, it was like, wow, Book of the New Sun, there's like torturer dudes, and like there's some robot dudes, and like the sun is on fire and it's like burning out. But then it was like, well, I had an incident myself like in the 80s where, you know, it was a hot tub thing, but we won't get into that here, but it felt like my sun was burning out, and at least that's what they told me when they woke me up a few months later. But Book of the New Sun, Gene Hungry Like the Wolf, he's got to be in the top 8. He's totally rad. I love this guy. Anyway, let's move on to the next book with me, Rick Thunder. And that's a fact. As we move through the years, we flip ahead a couple of years. And to be honest with you, I was kind of maybe a little unconscious for part of it. But in 1982, I woke up and there was a book. It was called Magician Apprentice and then Magician Master by Raymond E. Feist for Your Right to Party. Now, I don't remember exactly what it was about because it's kind of a long time ago, but I remember there's a magician. And like one time I was in Las Vegas and I ran into a magician. It was David Copperfield. And I said, David Copperfield. And he kind of looked at me like he wasn't sure. And I was like, hey, it's me, Rick Thunder. And he was like, oh, hey, Rick Thunder, what's going down? And I said, David Copperfield, you know, I write a lot of books and I read a lot of books. Well, I haven't written any books yet, but I read a lot of books. And I read a book about you. It was called David Copperfield. And he said, that's really cool. We should go to the bar and talk about it. So we went to the bar and talked about it. Me and the magician himself, David Copperfield. I don't know if he's read that book yet, but I think he probably had a hand in it. I don't know, but I think it's a fact. Now, as the years kind of go by a little bit, it is a little hazy, like there's smoke coming in from me. I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but there's smoke in this room because that's part of my contract. Why? Because I'm me, Rick Thunder. Anyway, 1984. What happened in 1984? I was thinking about the book, but that's not the book. Oh yeah, the book, Neuromancer by William Gibson. Now, I've never met William Gibson, but some guys in my bands, they play Gibson guitars. And I'm wondering, does this guy like write books and then go make guitars? I think he does. You know what? Let me think about it a little bit. He does. And that's a fact. Neuromancer. It's a totally awesome, rad book. It's about computers. And they had computers in the 1980s, but now those computers, they're even smaller. They're smaller. Like some of the doctors say my brain cells have gotten over the last few years, but maybe decades, I don't know. Anyway, Neuromancer, you should read that book. William Gibson, amazing books, even better guitars. That's a fact. Okay, now we move into 1985. Now this is one of my favorite ones. Love this one. Now this one's called Ender's Game. And I like games, and this one's written by Orson Scott Welles. And you might know him from, he was in that movie Citizen Kane. And it's a really, really cool movie, but like, if you go back and you move up in time in like the 1980s, he was doing like commercials, you know, for like Paul Masson wines. You know, Orson Scott Welles, you know, he'd come out and say, hey, Paul Masson wines will sell no wines before their time. And one time, me, Rick Thunder, got invited to a shoot, and I was part of the commercial. It was so cool. You know why? Because Orson Scott Welles, he just knew what he was doing. He was so confident. He brought out that synth pop kingpin in me. Rick Thunder. So anyway, we're doing the commercial, and then he kind of passed out, but I don't have a whole lot to say about that because, hey, it happens to the best of us, right? It's totally rad. We know it. Okay, now let's move on. Now, in 1987, it was a great year for my band. We were synth popping all over the planet. But in the meantime, this guy, he wrote this book called The Drawing of the Three. His name is Stephen King. He's totally a king the way that he writes. Now, I know earlier in the decade he wrote something called The Gunslinger, but to be fair, not a lot of people loved it as much as they love The Drawing of the Three. And the three keys. You know how many keys you need to make in a chord? You need 3. And that's why Stephen King was making The Drawing of the Three, because while so many people think it's just like a book, it's not. It's a recipe. It's a recipe for pop synth artists like me, Rick Thunder. And he wrote that book specifically for that. And that's a fact. Okay, we're moving up to 1987. This was another bodacious book from this bodaciousest of years. I think that's a word. It's a wicked word if it is. Anyway, let's talk about this dude, Robert McCammon. He wrote this book called Swan Song, right? Now, in Swan Song, there's one person named Swan, and I thought when I got this book, it was going to be like a flock of swans, kind of like one of my friends in the band Flock of Seagulls. It was going to be flock of swans, but it wasn't. There wasn't any flock of swans anywhere. It's just this one girl named Swan. But this is still a really awesomely radical tubular book. Swan Song by Robert McCammon. You guys weren't there, but I was there. We were hiding under desks. They thought that the Russians are gonna bomb us, but they didn't. The only thing besides the nukes that never bombed in the 1980s was me, Rick Thunder. And that's a fact. All I know is I wanted there to be a little bit more flock of swans, like there would, but there wasn't. It's okay, Robert McCammon. What a bodaciously awesome book from 1987. Swan Song, you gotta check it out. That's a fact. Hey, so now we're moving into 1989. It's almost at the end of the decade, but it was still a really great year for everybody, including me, Rick Thunder. So this book came out called Hyperion by Dan Gene Simmons. Now, some of you guys may not know this, but he's also the bass player and one of the singers for the amazing rock and roll band Kiss. So I got his book right here too. Hyperion's over there somewhere. We can pull that out later if we want. Maybe I'll just show it in the cool 1980s graphics that we got up here. Anyway, so we're talking about Hyperion. Now this is so cool because there's this kind of space robot in there, and he's going after people, and people don't know what he is. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but I invented robots. It was the early 80s, and Bill Gates called me and he said, Rick Thunder, can you help me invent some robots? And I said, of course I can, Bill Gates. So we did, and we invented robots. It was so awesome in 1989, and the robot technology in 1989 in Hyperion, totally inspired by me, Rick Thunder. And that's a fact. This other dude, and the last book we're talking about right now today, in 1989, there's this book that came out called Guards. Now, when I first saw the title, my brain kind of went a little crazy. It kind of does that sometimes, There's a series of hot tub accidents. I can't remember if we talked about that already. If we didn't, there was a series of hot tub accidents. Anyway, here I am. I see this book. It's called Guards, and it reminded me of the times that they called the guards on me. How could they do that to Rick Thunder? Anyway, Guards by Sir Terry Pratchett. It's a really super funny book. It's totally radical that way. But one thing lots of people don't know, Sir Terry Pratchett was a knight. And he wrote all those books, especially Guards, because I was watching him, and he would put on a suit of armor, and he'd put on the helmet. It was just with the eyepiece so he could kind of see, and then he wrote the words out to Guards on parchment, old style, like the knights do. And he did not get up from his desk the whole time he wrote that book, Guards, in a full set of armor. How do you know it? Because it's a fact. Now, some of you may have reviewed these 8 books that I talked about. Some of you may have read them. Some of you may not have read them. And that would be so heinous. If you have not read every one of these books on my list, it is so heinous. It's a crime. It would be a stellar thing for you to do, to pick up each and every one of these 8 books that I just mentioned. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the books were because things kind of fade in and out for me, so my memory's not exactly what it used to be. I don't even know if it ever was. But anyway, one thing you should know about this experience and this appearance that I'm making today, it's on a commission. The only way I'm getting a commission from that dude over there, Brian, whatever his name is if the video does pretty good, and maybe you watch some of his other videos. I don't know, he says if you watch the whole BellTube catalog, my commission might even be better. And who would you rather see a commission go to than me, Rick Thunder? And you know, that's a